Dr. Harith, an archaeologist who spent his life among the dust and secrets of the past, now sits on a hard wooden chair, not in his office filled with books, maps, and modest artifacts, but in a dimly lit hospital room where the air smells of disinfectant and anxiety. Beside him lies his only daughter, Layla, now 16 years old. Paleness covers her delicate face, and her wide eyes, once full of vitality and curiosity, now appear clouded and weary from leukemia. Silent pain grips Harith's heart with every labored breath his daughter takes.
Layla, light of my eyes, how can the world be so cruel? To test me with the most precious thing I own.
Harith murmured to himself, his hand gently stroking Layla's frail one.
The bills pile up like mountains, and doors close in my face. Loans rejected. I sold everything I owned, every small, precious memory, and it wasn't enough.
Amidst this despair, with his soul crushed under the weight of a poor father's helplessness, his only remaining passion, archaeology, drove him on a desperate journey. He wasn't just searching for a treasure, but for a miracle. And in a remote area of the western desert, under the shroud of a light sandstorm that began whispering of buried secrets, the discovery was made. It was no ordinary tomb. In that moment, Harith knew this tomb was not like the others. It wasn't just the resting place of an ancient king. It was a gateway. It contained something of immense power or immense danger. Amidst the strange carvings, he saw symbols that resembled a sign for Mercury or perhaps for immortality in a strange and unsettling way. His heart pounded violently, a mix of fear and desperate hope. Fate alone didn't lead Harith down this dark path. In this crucial moment of despair and mystery, Samir appeared. He wasn't just a casual old friend. He was a former colleague of Harith's from the university, expelled due to unethical practices and suspicions regarding illicit artifact trafficking. He was a man with murky connections to the underworld, whose smile never reached his eyes. Samir visited Harith not to offer comfort, but to test the waters. He saw the despair etched on his old friend's face and ruthlessly exploited it. In a hushed tone, he hinted at other ways to get money quickly, ways unknown to honorable academics. He spoke of the interest of certain wealthy individuals obsessed not just with collecting pharaonic artifacts, but with their purported powers, their buried secrets, especially those related to immortality and eternal life. Samir's talk brimmed with innuendo, his greedy glances meeting Harith's hesitant ones. Harith resisted at first, his dignity and knowledge rebelled against this path. Yet the image of Layla's deteriorating health, the sound of her weak breaths, proved stronger than any moral compass. Gradually, Harith surrendered, his soul sold bit by bit under the pressure of desperate need. The place Samir arranged the meeting was no ordinary location. It wasn't just an apartment or an office. It was an isolated mansion on the outskirts of the city, hidden from prying eyes. A luxurious villa with bizarre decor that blended extreme wealth with primitive brutality and death. Skulls of wild animals adorned shelves, distorted or shattered pharaonic statues hinted at desecration rather than display. The atmosphere was charged with tension. Armed guards gave cold, suspicious stares. In the heart of this organized chaos sat Hoffman, a large man with eyes as cold as the desert ice at night. His face bore scars, perhaps marks of an old illness or battle wounds. His obsession with immortality and power was evident in every word. He seemed to fear death more than anything else. He spoke of his desire to build an immortal army, a gang that couldn't die, using the secrets and purported powers of the pharaohs. He mentioned Red Mercury in a whisper, as if it were a sacred name, stating he had heard of it from other sources. Sources that could only be suspicious and dark. The negotiations were tense, like a thin thread about to snap. Hoffman didn't just offer money. His words carried veiled threats against Harith or perhaps Layla if he didn't cooperate. Harith described his internal revulsion as he forced himself to agree. His soul screamed in rejection, but the image of Layla's suffering forced him to swallow his dignity and honor. The demand stunned Harith and shattered any remaining illusion that this deal might be the lesser of two evils. Othman revealed the need for a human sacrifice, a virgin girl, to appease the tomb guardian, as he claimed, or to open the magical gate based on his twisted and malicious information. Harith's shock was immense, his horror unspeakable. But the sound of the disease gnawing at his daughter echoed in his ears, rationalizing this atrocity. "It's to save Layla, to save Layla," he repeated to himself in despair. Samir led Othman's men and Harith, who had become a reluctant accomplice, to a remote village. The rural atmosphere at night was dark and desolate. Muted silence blanketed the place, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the trees and the dancing shadows that seemed to hide sinister beings. A heavy sense of anticipation and fear hung over everything. The gang members, they weren't just blind tools. Glimpses of cruelty and greed showed in their cold eyes. Some seemed more afraid of Othman himself than anything else. They began their watch. Their eyes scanned the simple houses, gathering information in terrifying ways, whispering the names of young girls. And in a pivotal moment in this black night, the choice fell upon Zara. Just a quick glimpse. A young girl with an innocent beauty not yet tainted by the harshness of life. Perhaps we saw her moments before the catastrophe, smiling in a simple dream or helping her mother with difficult daily chores, showing her innocent dreams shattered in an instant. Samir, Harith, and Osman's three chosen men identified the right girl. She would be the offering, the key to appeasing the tomb's guardian. This dark offering would grant them entry, allowing them to seize the treasures within, especially Osman's greatest prize, the legendary Red Mercury, believed to grant immortality and power he so desired. The timing of her abduction was meticulously planned. It was set for just 3 days, precisely in the middle of the month, under the terrifying light of a full moon. A celestial witness, silent and cold, was perhaps specially chosen to oversee the heinous crime they were about to commit. The 3 men who carried out the abduction returned to their rendezvous point. They were visibly drunk, their laughter loud and revolting, shattering the desolate silence of the night. Her clothes were torn and stained in a way that left no room for doubt. A brief, chilling conversation passed between them, hinting at the unspeakable act. "Didn't deserve the boss alone," one of them sneered, a vile smile twisting his lips. But the most horrifying truth was that no one breathed a word of this vile secret. The horrific reality was confirmed only by their state and words. The condition of virginity that Othman demanded for the sacrifice had been brutally violated, corrupted by the gang members' base desires. The slaughter and blood collection, Zara's blood, her severed head, and her body, were incorporated into Othman's brutal ritual. The details were sickening. Harith, who was present for the horror, described it as nauseated, an unbearable sense of guilt suffocating him, and the crushing weight of knowing he had allowed these vicious, barbaric acts to happen, all to save his daughter. The arduous journey across the desert at night was fraught with tension. Harith felt like he would explode from anxiety and guilt. Samir seemed tense too, despite his attempts to hide it. Only Othman walked with arrogant confidence, believing he was about to gain immense power. The fearful whispers of his men could be heard in the darkness. They felt the ill omen of the place. The atmosphere was charged with terrifying anticipation. They finally reached the site. The tomb entrance looked more terrifying in the dim light of their torches. There were ancient seals that hadn't been completely broken, as if clinging to protect the one buried inside. The air was heavy, unbearable, and its smell was strange, a mix of dust, decay, and something else. Something unnatural and inhuman. As soon as their feet crossed the threshold, they felt as if they were not alone. The darkness was absolute, and the torches they carried seemed to flicker unnaturally. struggling to ward off the thick shadows that seemed to swallow the light. The sound of their footsteps echoed strangely and amplified, as if many footsteps walked with them. The carvings on the walls, did they tell the story of the buried pharaoh? Or did they warn trespassers? Or did they hint at the presence of the guardian or the Red Mercury in a twisted way? After a short corridor, the space suddenly opened up into a vast main chamber, much larger than the entrance suggested. There was more than one sarcophagus, as if it were a collective tomb for something. The statues scattered around the room seemed to follow them with their eyes in the darkness, their gazes empty yet strangely alive. Piles of gold and treasures glimmered alluring and evilly. In the dancing torchlight, in the heart of the room was the main royal sarcophagus. It was decorated extraordinarily, not with the familiar royal motifs, but with strange symbols, twisting and intertwining in a way that suggested a dormant power, or buried madness. Once all the men had entered the depths of the pharaonic tomb, the passageway behind them closed, not by a collapse, but by a solid limestone boulder appearing out of nowhere, completely blocking the entrance. A wave of tension swept through the entire group, a sudden, shared terror. Then, before them, a creature of strange, terrifying proportions appeared. It bore the form of a giant human, but surmounted by the head of a massive, roaring wolf. Its ears were like twisted horns, its wide eyes glowed with a fierce red light, and enormous wings of glowing fire extended from its back. In its terrifying presence, every man stood completely still, frozen. It spoke, its voice vibrating in their bones.
No one leaves here as a human. The blood of God, the Red Mercury, will be in your hands. If you satisfy me.
Uthman and his men interpreted this as a request for the promised sacrifice, and they began their brutal, satanic ritual with frenzy. Using Pharaoh's impure blood, her head, and her body, they attempted to appease the terrifying guardian. They shouted strange, guttural words that they believed would appease the entity or open the magical portal, their panicked voices echoing in vain off the silent walls of the tomb. But instead of the guardian appearing as they imagined, something went wrong. A violent tremor shook the tomb, as if something colossal was awakening deep underground. All the torches suddenly extinguished, plunging them into complete and absolute darkness. Non-human screams, not from human mouths, erupted deafeningly from the walls themselves, as if the tomb was screaming in rage. Symbols glowing blood red began appearing on the walls everywhere, lighting up and pulsating as if they were living veins. A sudden and sharp drop in temperature made the air freeze in their lungs. The guardian did not appear as a lamp genie or a traditional spirit. It was far more terrifying. It began as a giant shadow forming from the swirling tomb dust, growing and expanding, absorbing the darkness around it. Then it took on a terrifying shape, not entirely a mummy, but a creature half mummy, half something else that could not be described. Something from another realm that humans could not comprehend. Perhaps it manifested in a form resembling a sacred animal, Anubis, but in a distorted and horrifying way, with burning red eyes. Its voice was not a single voice, but a multi-voiced whisper, interwoven and tangled, filling the space and piercing bones. The pharaonic tomb guard wasted no time. He angrily revealed that the offering was unclean and unacceptable. Uthman and his men didn't understand the words, but they understood his anger. For a moment, the Jinn showed Harith horrifying and painful mental images, fleeting glimpses of what the gang had done to Zara, confirming that the offering was not a virgin as they had claimed. This was a horrifying revelation, not just for Harith, but for everyone who understood its meaning. The punishment began. It was not a quick death. The sound of bones breaking beneath tearing skin, human features twisting and distorting, skin tearing away to reveal shimmering scales, limbs elongating and deforming, their human screams transforming into terrifying hisses, and their eyes becoming lidless, cold, and red as mercury. They had transformed into giant, monstrous snakes. Worse, these transformed snakes began attacking some of the other gang members who had not directly participated in the desecration, increasing the chaos and absolute terror. The demon, or rather the terrifying entity, that was the guardian, trapped Harith, Samir, and Othman with the remaining giant snakes and its terrifying, incomprehensible power. The threat was clear.
Eternal torment worse than death.
Perhaps as a form of absolute mockery or a final, irresistible temptation. The demon spoke of the Red Mercury. It told Harith that it was located in the heart of the royal sarcophagus, and that it was the key to the power and immortality Othman sought. But it explained that this key was not given for free. It required a high price and absolute loyalty to the forces of darkness. The demon, or guardian of the pharaonic tomb, whispered an offer that chilled Harith's blood.
Kill these two fools. Drink their blood as an offering to me. Renounce every other god you worship and join my service. Worship me and the dark forces I represent, and be my steward on Earth. And I will give you Red Mercury, to save your daughter, to grant her eternal life.
It was a moment of terrible struggle within Harith. The image of Layla dying in the hospital contrasted with the absolute horror of the offer. Did he glimpse a dark future if he accepted, a future where the Harith he knew would cease to exist? But despair was stronger than anything else. The despair of a father about to lose his daughter. Despair pushed him towards the abyss. Harith accepted. In a broken voice, a whisper barely audible. After Harith agreed to the deal, Harith persuaded Othman and Samir to step away from the Jinn for a moment, away from the shifting gazes of the snakes, to consider what they would do next. In another dark passageway of the tomb, Harith betrayed them. The fight was brief and brutal. Harith wasn't a skilled fighter, but he fought with utter desperation, driven by the promise of saving Layla. He pulled out the knife Samir was holding, stabbed him in the back, and pushed him to the ground. He then faced the massive Othman in a deadly struggle that ended with a fatal stab wound to the neck, causing Othman's blood to splatter. Then came the most terrifying part. After he was certain they were both dead, Harith cut a vein in Samir's hand and drank his blood. He then drank Othman's blood that splattered on the ground. It wasn't a celebration, but a dark, sickening ritual concluding this cursed event. Harith was trembling, nauseated, but he forced himself to complete the ritual at the devil's command. With every drop of their blood he swallowed, he felt as if a part of his soul was being ripped out and replaced by something cold and dark. As Harith reached out to touch the glowing object, he felt a sudden and terrifying internal change. It wasn't just a power coursing through his veins, but a coldness, a harshness, a deep darkness enveloping him from within. He felt as if his very soul were shrinking and disappearing. For a moment, his eyes turned blood red, or his shadow grew taller and darker, moving independently of his body. The guard whispered in his ear, confirming,
You are now a servant of darkness, my agent on Earth, and you now possess a part of the power of the pharaonic gods.
Harith returned to Layla. He was no longer the same desperate father. He carried the glowing object, the Red Mercury. His eyes looked different, deeper, and darker. Upon his arrival, without hesitation, Harith took the Red Mercury. Perhaps he mixed it with a drop of his cursed blood. Then he gave it to Layla, as the tomb guard had instructed. Her pallor didn't disappear spontaneously. Instead, it was replaced by an unnatural redness, as if her blood were boiling beneath her translucent skin. The whites of her eyes gradually began to turn blood red, as if burning with an inner fire. Perhaps she began to tremble and convulse for a moment, as if her small body were resisting the alien force invading it. Then she settled into an unnatural stillness. She regained the physical strength she hadn't possessed even before her illness, but she had lost something precious that couldn't be seen. something of her humanity or her innocence. Was it as if another soul had inhabited her body? Years passed. Layla appeared healthy, even unnaturally strong. But she was withdrawn and strange, perhaps simple. Unnatural powers manifested strength beyond her years, sensitivity to bright light, a strange aversion to religious symbols or holy places. She seemed not to fully belong to this world anymore. As for Harith, he continued his life as a servant of darkness in secret. Perhaps he influenced certain events or offered other sacrifices to the demon in ways no one knew. He lived to lives the life of the father who saved his daughter, and the life of the agent for the forces of darkness. But the dark secret could not remain buried forever. How did Layla discover the truth? It began with nightmares that plagued her, showing her flashes of what happened in the tomb, which she didn't fully understand, but that stirred her anxiety and horror. The power of the Red Mercury within her began to awaken, showing her dark memories or truths she couldn't have comprehended had she not been a part of it. The discovery was shocking, devastating to her innocent soul, which was no longer entirely innocent. The place of the confrontation was not ordinary. Layla returned to the tomb herself, driven by a force she didn't understand, and her father deliberately followed her there. The tomb itself held immense symbolic significance for both of them. Layla confronted her father with what she knew. It was no ordinary conversation. It was a painful mix of the old love that had been between them, the horrifying betrayal he committed in the name of that love, the terror that overwhelmed her soul from the reality of what she had become, and deep sorrow for the father she had known and lost. Harith tried to justify his action, screaming that everything he did was to save her, to give her a chance at life. But Layla saw the dark truth. Perhaps, in a chilling moment, Harith revealed his full demonic nature, a cold smile on his face that was not his own. Finally, the ancient words were revealed, and the demon's face appeared to her with a frightening smile, speaking to her in whispers.
The absolute rule of the cursed entity. A demon must drink the blood of the immortality it created to perish.
In a moment of desperate and tragic heroism, Layla knew what she had to do. With a trembling hand, she cut herself. It wasn't just a cut, she'd severed a vein, the place from which the blood glowing with red mercury flowed. Grabbing the demon's servant's face, she forced him to drink her cursed blood. His death was horrifying and fitting for a demonic being destroyed from within by the reflected power of the red mercury. His body began to distort, to disintegrate, screaming with a non-human sound. It was not death, but a terrifying fading into the darkness he had served. What happened to Layla after his death? Did she return to normal, finally healed from her illness and the curse of the red mercury? Did she die too, the final price of the cursed deal? Or did she remain immortal, alone, carrying the burden of what had happened? Her soul was tormented by the painful memory, her body inhabited by the dark legacy her father created.